This is the Big Stories Podcast, where we tell the amazing and inspiring stories from across the Big 12 Conference.
Welcome into another edition of the Big Stories Podcast. I am coming to you from an undisclosed location in the great state of Texas. I wish I could say that I was in the Lone Star State to watch some Big 12 hoops. I even passed through Waco previous to the Baylor-Arizona State game. Last I was in Waco to take my wife to the Dr. Pepper Museum. I missed the game. We had a family wedding to attend, which was very nice, but you didn't come to the podcast to talk marriage. This is about the Big 12, so let's dive in, and let's go in a little bit different order.
The Big Stories' 5 biggest storylines. Number 5.
JT Toppin and Texas Tech. I know this is a bit of old news, but I wanted to give a shout out to JT Toppin. The big man was playing so well this season, and we talked about him repeating as the Big 12 Player of the Year, and then he tears his ACL. The Red Raiders squad is so dependent on the duo of Toppin and guard Christian Anderson. I now wonder how they're going to do the rest of the season and in the Big 12 tournament. I'm saying that even though I know they scored 100 points against Kansas State, but it is Kansas State, and they were at home. Grant McCaslin, he's the head coach of the team, has his work cut out for him if he wants to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. As for Toppin, I doubt he's going to declare for the NBA draft. I checked out a couple of mock drafts, and the undersized big man was expected to go somewhere in the second round. The ACL injury will not help him now. Mr. Toppin, he's had a lot of success at Texas Tech. Is he going to return? Well, we'll see. I would think so. Then again, you never know what'll happen in the transfer portal.
Number 4.
I've talked a lot about the Big 12 being either the top basketball conference or one of the top in the country. They just won't have the numbers that the Big Ten has. As of right now, ESPN's Joe Lunardi has 6 locks for the NCAA tournament, and I think you can figure out who they are. So what about the teams on the bubble? UCF has a good enough resume and favorable enough schedule to finish out the regular season and be considered an at-large team. Get a win in the Big 12 tourney, and they probably punch their ticket. TCU could also put themselves in a good position if they win out. Their biggest test will be at Texas Tech without the aforementioned JT Toppin. West Virginia took a hit by losing to TCU. Cincinnati could be in the mix after beating Kansas. They could also be out of the mix pretty quickly in their last 4 games. By the way, their last game is against TCU. One last thing, I think that all the teams that are ranked and probably going to be in the tournament, they should beware of these 4 teams that we just talked about who are trying to put their stamp on the rest of the regular season and get into that NCAA tournament.
Number 3.
Who will be the conference's number 1 seed? I really think it's down to Arizona and Houston. Arizona has the edge now after beating the Cougs. There are a few teams who are 2 games in back of Arizona as of Monday. Iowa State and Kansas probably have the best chance of catching the Wildcats since they both play the Cats before the end of the regular season, but both of those games are at the McHale Center. Then again, is it really going to matter? I could see any of those teams winning the Big 12 Conference Tournament.
Number 2.
How'd they do? Here's what I'm talking about. The Big Stories Podcast, we interviewed a lot of different podcasters and reporters, and we wanted to see if we're sending out good vibes or bad vibes when we have these people on the pod. I thought it'd be fun just to check to see how those teams have done. Well, last week we featured Colorado and UCF. The Knights went 2-0 after we featured them, while Colorado went 1-1. The week before we featured Texas Tech, they've gone 3-1, but that one loss was to Arizona State, and that's when they lost JT Toppin for the season. So, good record, bad results when it comes to who's on the team. And then finally, we featured ASU the week prior to Texas Tech, and they are exactly 500 since we talked about the Sun Devils. Only 1 case of bad luck for the team, so I think we can still interview people.
Number 1.
All right, it's story time with our podcasters from around the Big 12, and we're going to begin with TCU. You know, the bubble team we've already talked about. They may not be a bubble team if they had done better earlier in the season. It's been a little bit up and down for the Horned Frogs. So I asked Bleav and TCU podcaster Seth Dowdle if the Horned Frogs have figured themselves out during this roller coaster season.
You know, you could extrapolate that to the entire season has been a roller coaster. Just not even just conference play. It's been a completely up and down season for TCU? And to answer that question, I don't know. I don't even know if they know that, because one day, they'll go out there, and this, you can even say this for one game in particular. For one half, they are looking like a well-oiled machine, and then even just like the last 3 minutes of a basketball game, they completely combust and forget how to do everything it seems like they've known how to do for the rest of like the first 35 minutes of the game. You could say that was the case in the Kansas loss back in January, where they were leading the Jayhawks by 15 points late in that game with 3 minutes left, and they lose it. Heck, even the win against Oklahoma State this past weekend, they were up big in the second half, and then they ended up having to go to overtime. So I don't know. It's been one of those seasons where, and this was kind of the case last year too with Jamie Dixon's squad, where every single game feels like its own separate experience, where there's no cohesion between one game to the next. It's just it's almost like you're plopping a completely different basketball team on the court each game. And that could even be each half of each basketball game. It's a weird experience, but it's been kind of fun to watch, because you'll just never know what you're going to get.
I would think that one of the fun aspects of this team, at least maybe this is me just thinking about it from afar, is you've got a sophomore in David Punch. He's leading the team in scoring, and a fellow sophomore in Micah Robinson, who's chipping in some good scoring and some minutes off the bench. Tell us how these guys have really stepped up from year one to year two for the Horned Frogs.
That's been a lot of fun to watch, because last year the team was pretty young, and even this year, it's still young. A lot of the leading scorers you just mentioned are sophomore talents, like Punch, and Xavier Edmonds is kind of a guy that's new to the team as well. And, Micah Robinson, that's been a lot of fun to watch their maturity grow from year one to year two. Some of these close wins that they've had, particularly the ones, against Oklahoma State, and, even the ones against Baylor early on, I don't know if they win those games last year. Just based on, the lack of maturity and experience that they had, in the 24-25 season, and now heading into 25-26. And that's especially the case for David Punch, where he's kind of just taken that role as, I'm the guy on this team. And there's been moments in games where he has just taken over. There was the win against Oklahoma State, not this one this past weekend, but the one that they played him back in January, where he went on, they were down late, big, and it looked like they were going to lose, and he just scored 8 straight and delivered TCU a win. And that's not something he was probably capable of doing last year, and now he's doing it almost on a nightly basis, where he just goes out there and takes control. Same thing with Micah Robinson. He was one of my X factors kind of heading into the season for TCU. Like, what is he going to look like for TCU? And I've really liked what I've seen from him.
Now, none of the top scorers are scoring like a bunch of points. I mean, David Punch is scoring around 14 points a game, but it has been balanced out, which kind of explains when you've got some younger players, maybe they're not going to be those big-time scorers all the time, but it is balanced out. How important is that dependability across the floor to help this team, week in and week out during the Big 12 conference season?
I think it's that depth that really has made TCU a different team than they were last year. I mean, they've dealt with some injuries over the past couple of years that's kind of hampered that depth, particularly at the top end. And this year, while there has been, maybe on and off some players missing games, you can count on every guy on the floor to at least make an impact at some point during a game. And that's not something we've seen from TCU in a couple of seasons now, ever since kind of the Mike Miles, Damian Baugh, teams where they were making tournaments and almost, going to Sweet 16s and stuff like that. That's kind of the difference in this team. And what I really think makes it big is Brock Harding's presence on the floor. He's this big facilitator. He can get it to anybody. So he's just kind of that centerpiece where he has the ball, and then the other 4 kind of just orbit around him. And that's kind of the difference, is that you have that guy who can get the ball to the scorers, and then the scorers can actually, do their job and score.
The Big 12 Conference Tournament sneaking up on us. From what you've seen this season, what gives you hope that TCU could, potentially go far in the tourney and possibly make the NCAA Tournament?
I think it's that proof of concept that they have played well against top-end teams. Now, they haven't always beaten those teams. I'll point to the games against Michigan early on. They're one of the only teams that's played Michigan super close, at least, early on. They lose by 4 in Fort Worth back in November. They beat Iowa State last week. I think you can point to that as a proof of concept that they have what it takes to win a big time basketball game. And so I'd point to that, but I also do have my doubts that they can show up in those moments too, because I have just seen from TCU in the Big 12 tournament these past couple times around where it's been kind of stinkers. They had a game against Houston 2 years ago, I think, where they didn't score a bucket for the first 10 minutes, and this was coming off a game where they won their first game in the tournament, and they play Houston, and Houston's a great basketball program, and it's not that I expected TCU to win, but you expect them to score in the first 10 minutes. It's just they put out these stinker performances against these teams in these moments, sometimes in Kansas City. So I do have my doubts, but if you want to point to reasons why they can compete, it's those games against Michigan early on. They beat Florida, back in, that preseason, midseason tournament back in November. And, they played Kansas close. They, were up against BYU in Provo. They kind of gave Arizona a little bit of a run for their money too, and they beat Iowa State. So you can point to that, but then you can also look at losses to Utah and Colorado and say, well, this is a team that I don't know if they're going to be able to go very far. Again, roller coaster.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because when I think about it, when you're going through all those games, to me, it does seem like it's a young team, but it seems like, hey, we're learning something along the way, which would kind of hopefully give me a little bit of hope. I mean, if it's not for this season, it may be for next season. When I think of TCU, I know that Jamie Dixon has been there for a while, but when I still think of TCU, I think football over basketball. I'm going to readily admit to that.
Yeah.
So what would an NCAA tournament appearance mean for this team if they make it in?
It would mean so much. Like, that is kind of the goal, is to just make the field at TCU. Before Jamie Dixon got here, it was a desert. You looked at Shomile Arena, there was no banners that said, there was a couple, but basically zero that said NCAA tournament appearance. It was very much vacant. And, the women's team has helped that a little bit lately too, but they're playing really well. So we've got that in our back pocket now, but it was just nothing in that basketball arena. And then he came here and, he got a couple of appearances, but we haven't been in a couple of years. And just even making it would be a big deal for sure, because you're right, the football program and even the baseball team, those are the prominent athletic, teams in Fort Worth. And so just to, kind of have, just put your foot in the door if you're the basketball team and say, hey, we're here, we exist, we can have success. That would mean a whole lot, I think, for this team in particular, which had its doubters heading into the season.
Seth, we really appreciate you talking to us about the Horned Frog basketball team. If people want to find out more about the Horned Frogs, where can they find you?
Well, you can listen to my podcast, Bleav in TCU. I host that alongside my co-host and friend, Zion Trammell. And you can also find my written work about TCU on TCU on SI.
A big thanks again to Seth. A team that's had an excellent campaign so far this Big 12 conference season is Iowa State. They lost at BYU this past weekend, but they have a history of bouncing back after losses. I talked to Bleav in Iowa State podcaster Tyler Carter about what is propelling the Cyclones after losses.
I think it's just the fact that they know, I think TJ Altenberger reminds them of what type of team that they are. And then they whip it back into shape, because we've seen this the last few years when we used to chalk it up to the roster really wasn't that talented, where they used to just have these random slumps where they used to lose 2 or 3 games. But when you see overall, this roster is a whole lot more talented, even in the 2023 team that went to the Sweet 16, and then last year, I think we have a lot more guard depth than last time, which I think has helped bring us out of these slumps.
I think what impressed me most about Iowa State's win over Houston at home was the bench coming to the rescue late in the game. Jamarian Bateman hits a 3 to put them up by 1 kind of late in the game, and then Nate Heisey hits another 3 that eventually kind of turns out to be the game winner. For the most part, the bench is really only 3 deep, but how have they helped the Cyclones this season?
Yeah, Jamarian Bateman is a guy who just, even in high school, hasn't shied away from the spotlight. There was one game, actually, in high school where he hit 15 threes. I just think when when at the beginning of the season, like when Coach Otts was telling everybody in the fan base, "Oh, he's going to be coming along." We didn't really believe it, but now it's February and it's almost tournament time, and he's hitting big. He went 2 of 5 from three and had 6 points, and the KU game he had 11. So we see him growing up right before his eyes. Dominicus Plata, the freshman from Germany, it took him a bit to adjust to the States and how we play basketball. He's finally coming into his own, and he had 8 points off the bench. Heisey, just ever since he's been here since last year, he's been a guy who usually from February on finds his game. Just Heisey really coming into his own, and this is the time where he usually takes off. This is where he took off last year.
Nate Heisey kind of reminds me of one of those guys that it's like you hate him when he's on the opposing team, but when he's on your team, it's just like, yeah, I love that guy. I don't know. That's just me. That's kind of what Nate Heisey reminds me of. So anyway, Texas Tech's JT Toppin, he was making a fairly strong case. I know there are a lot of guys out there who could be player of the year, but JT Toppin was making a fairly strong case to repeat as Big 12 Conference Player of the Year. He's now out with an ACL injury. Cyclones senior forward Joshua Jefferson could be another strong contender. Sell fans out there on why he should be considered as the Big 12 Player of the Year, even though he's not even leading his team in scoring right now.
I think you said it right there. Obviously, he's not leading his team in scoring, but I think Player of the Year is much more than that. Just being the guy that can be counted on in key situations. Just being unselfish. He's very unselfish with the ball and a great passer. And he's had already 2 triple-doubles this year. So I think for me, one of the reasons why Joshua Jefferson should be considered as a Player of the Year is he's very, very versatile. He can work from the top of the key. He can average a triple-double or he can go for 30. I think he's a very versatile player, so I think that's why he should definitely be considered for Player of the Year.
I think what I've been impressed by him also is that he just basically takes what's given to him. He's just like, whatever the team needs of me, that's what I'm going to do, and that's pretty impressive. That's almost more impressive sometimes than the guy who goes out there and is chucking it up all the time. Tamin Lipsey, he's another guy. Another senior. He and Joshua Jefferson, 2 seniors on the team. Is this team going to go as far as he can take them? Because he seems to be the guy that leads this team. And again, maybe he doesn't score a lot, but he seems to me like he's the floor leader of this team.
Tamin is definitely the leader of the team. Tamin is just Mr. Iowa State. Like we had the mayor and Fred Hoiberg, but like Tamin embodies everything that Iowa State University stands for. I gotta say, just like the winning plays that he made in Monday's game, where especially at the end of the game, where he dove for so many loose balls, and you saw and it happened in the Kansas game where his legs were just scratched up, and then he just limps up and gets back up and does it again, and then he had a huge rebound to win the game for Tamin Lipsey. I remember I always live tweet during games, and I'm like, Tamin Lipsey, I love you. So it's just like obviously for him, like, he doesn't need to have as many points. One thing I really like about this team is just the unselfishness of it. So I just think him and Joshua Jefferson, I think as long as them and Milan are gonna lead this team as far as they can take him.
Every year we hear about teams like Arizona or Duke or Michigan, the blue blood programs. We hear about them a lot. It seems like Iowa State is kind of sliding underneath the radar as one of the nation's top contenders. What are some elements of this team that you see that could lead to a long run in the NCAA tournament and possibly making it to the Final Four?
So one thing for me, I think, is the way that we play defense and the ball pressure that we have defensively is going to definitely frustrate a lot of teams. especially that teams that aren't used to that type of defense from the Big 12. That's why I really think a lot of Big 12 teams are going to make it far into the tournament. It's either that or, depending on how the game is ref, that could be a detriment. But I think that's one of the reasons. Milan still being able to be consistent and hit shots, and just everybody else on the team hitting shots, like Heisey being able to hit shots, Jamarian Bateman coming off the bench getting, and Torre, obviously Cleon Torre, our other point guard, the young guy, him being able to, and then I just think Dominica's Plata coming into his own and being able to take minutes away from Buchanan, has made Buchanan a better player. So I just think being in cohesiveness with everyone on the team, just with our fact that we have elite ball pressure, I think is gonna and how efficient we are when everybody is able to score and contribute, I think is going to be dangerous for any team that faces Iowa State.
Coming up on Thursday's edition of the podcast, we feature UCF student and reporter Andrew Cherico. Colorado coach Deion Sanders praised Andrew after a game, not for his reporting skills, but for being an inspiration to others who have disabilities. Andrew has spinal muscular atrophy. You'll find out more about that and the guy who's inspiring him in our next episode. A big thanks to Tyler Carter and Seth Dowdle for joining us on this episode. Also a big thanks to Garrett Glauser for producing the episode. Check out all of our Big Stories episodes wherever you get podcasts. I'm Cleon Wall, and Big Stories is a production of BYU Radio.